What if I told you that one of the most notorious serial killers in American history could have been stopped multiple times but wasn't? That the justice system had the chance to intervene early and just didn't. This isn't just about gruesome crimes, it's about how legal systems fail when discretion turns into indifference, when bias clouds judgment, and when laws meant to protect the vulnerable are applied selectively. Today, then we're breaking down how the law failed in the Jeffrey Dahmer case. Let's go back to 1988. Dahmer had already taken multiple lives, but this was when he was convicted. Not of murder, but of sexual assault. Specifically, he drugged and molested a 13-year-old boy. He was sentenced to 1 year in jail with work release and 5 years probation. That's it. A man who lured a child, drugged him, and assaulted him. Didn't go to prison. He got weekends off. The system treated him like a first-time offender who just needed rehabilitation. But here's the thing. Prosecutors had the option to push for more. The sentencing judge had discretion to impose a harsher penalty. Probation was a choice, and it was a fatal one. The truth is, law enforcement and the courts had multiple off-ramps where they could have intervened and didn't. Let's talk about police discretion. Cops don't enforce every law to the letter every time. They use judgment, they decide what to investigate, who to arrest, when to file charges, and when to walk away. That's part of the job, but when that discretion gets warped by personal bias or indifference, it stops being a tool and becomes a shield. And in Dahmer's case, that shield was thick. In May 1991, 14-year-old Conorak Synthosamphone, yes, the younger brother of the earlier victim, was found wandering the street naked, bleeding, and clearly in distress. Two women called 911. Police arrived. So did Dahmer. And instead of arresting Dahmer or even investigating further, officers turned the boy over to him. You heard that right. Gave a drugged child back to his abuser. Why? Dahmer told the cops they were boyfriends having a spat. The officers laughed it off. Now, let's bring in probable cause, the legal standard that allows police to make an arrest or conduct a search if they reasonably believe a crime has been committed. Seeing a disoriented, bleeding teenager with head injuries should easily qualify as probable cause, especially when the man claiming to be his partner has a prior sexual assault conviction on record against a boy from the same family. But the officers didn't run a background check, didn't ask for ID, didn't check hospital records, nothing. They handed Conorak back and told the women to mind their business. Hours later, that boy was dead, murdered, dismembered, and kept as part of Dahmer's growing collection of victims. This wasn't just a missed opportunity. This was institutional negligence, and it wasn't the only time. There were reports from neighbors about strange smells, screams, even a decapitated body spotted by a man who fled the apartment. But the police never pursued them seriously. They chalked it up to domestic issues or gay culture as if that somehow explained everything away. This brings us to systemic bias, and it's uncomfortable, but it has to be said. The majority of Dahmer's victims were young men of color, Black, Latino, Southeast Asian. Many were gay, some were undocumented, all were marginalized. And those demographics mattered. It's not just about who Dahmer targeted, it's about who society didn't care enough to protect. Would police have acted differently if the victims were white, straight, and from affluent families? That's the real question, and too often the answer is yes. When communities are devalued, when race and class and sexuality influence credibility, victims become invisible, and predators like Dahmer exploit that invisibility. He knew exactly who to target and why the system wouldn't stop him. And here's the kicker. Dahmer was almost caught again in July 1991 when a potential victim escaped and flagged down police. This time, they searched his apartment. They saw photos of dismembered bodies. They found a barrel full of acid. They made the arrest. But the arrest was too late for 17 people. Let's pause here. We're not saying the officers wanted these men to die, but their actions or inactions enabled it. They failed at every checkpoint the law had set up to prevent exactly this kind of horror. Probation should have worked. Background checks should have worked. Witness credibility should have mattered. But the system was so saturated with assumptions about race, sexuality, and credibility that it broke. And when it broke, people died. Now, let's step back and think about this structurally. How do we fix a system that claims neutrality but delivers injustice? First, police departments need mandatory bias training. Real training, not a 2-hour HR seminar. Officers need to understand how their perception of victims changes based on identity. Second, discretion should come with accountability. Every time a potentially criminal situation is ignored or waved away, that decision should be documented and reviewable. Why did you choose not to investigate? What was the reasoning? Who gets the benefit of the doubt and why? Third, oversight. Independent civilian review boards need real power to investigate police failures, and not just after the fact, but proactively. Fourth, transparency in sentencing. Judges who give lenient sentences for serious crimes should be required to publish explanations. The public deserves to know why a sex offender gets weekends off while someone caught with weed gets years in prison. And finally, listen to communities. The women who called 911 that night saw what the officers didn't. They weren't biased, they weren't laughing, they were scared, but they were ignored. Law enforcement that listens only to itself becomes its echo chamber. The Jeffrey Dahmer case isn't just a story about a monster. It's a story about the silence that let him thrive. It's a story about blind spots in policing, leniency in prosecution, failures in sentencing, and most of all, how systems designed to protect can become tools of neglect when prejudice goes unchecked. The scariest part? It could happen again. Because until we treat every victim like they matter, and every report like it's worth investigating, we're still playing with the same broken pieces. Thanks for joining us today at Due Process Daily. Throw us a like and consider subscribing to the channel to help us grow.